Добрий день, з вами Оля.
Good afternoon, my name is Olga Atamanova and I want to thank everybody who joins Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. It's day 349 of the full-scale invasion of the Russian aggressor in our land, and I want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about our fight for freedom. Our brief schedule for today is as follows. At 13:30, joining us will be Serhiy Brachuk, the head of the Public Council at Odessa Regional State Administration, and we will talk about the situation with the power infrastructure in Odessa region. At 1300, joining us will be Yuri Sobolevsky, first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council, and we will talk about the situation in Kherson region. And joining us right now online is Vasyl Bodnar, Ukraine's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary to Turkey. Good afternoon, Mr. Vasyl. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Mr. Vasyl, a terrible disaster, terrible catastrophe that we are keep track of within the last 2 days happened in Turkey. As of this morning, we know that more than 3,000 casualties are a result of this terrible tragedy. Do you have any more details? Do you have any information about any Ukrainians who ended up in this catastrophe? Yes, the situation is very complicated because thousands of people died just overnight. 3,500 are already confirmed casualties, more than 20,000 injured, and thousands of houses were destroyed. As to the Ukrainians, we have 27 communication applications, communication requests submitted by the relatives of our Ukrainian citizens who were residing in those southern regions. Part of them were really affected by this tragedy because their residences were damaged, but they moved to their relatives or their friends, and nothing is threatening to their lives, but some of them are not yet contacted. But we have connections in our Ukrainian community who have connections via business or families, so we keep on searching for Ukrainians who could be affected by this tragedy. But you know, mostly Ukrainians live in the regions of Antalya, Ankara and Istanbul, and that region was less affected by those regions were less affected by the tragedy, but the epicenter of the catastrophe, the epicenter of the earthquake, are not so populated by Ukrainians. And for what we know, we don't have injured or casualties so far among Ukrainians. But to understand the scale of this tragedy, how many cities were affected by this earthquake, how many cities ended up in the epicenter of this catastrophe, and as to the scale of damage and destruction, do we have any information so far? Well, the total population of Turkey is 85 million people. For the time being, 13 million are considered to be affected by the tragedy. It means those who were left without their residences, without their dwellings. About 6,500 buildings were destroyed. This is what we have information about, but a lot of damage is not yet assessed. So the emergency teams are working on pulling the people from beneath the debris. Some of the roads are destroyed, so some of the districts cannot even be reached. Generally, the situation looks absolutely horrific. So according to the preliminary evaluation, the scale is way bigger than those of the earthquake which happened back in 1999 near Istanbul. Is there any information from seismologists? Is the earthquake over already, or are there going to be any more aftershocks? And what would be your advice for the Ukrainians who were about to visit Turkey shortly? Well, let's be realistic. Visiting Turkey doesn't mean visiting those regions which were affected by the regions. Most of Ukrainians, they travel mostly to Istanbul, and there are no any aftermath or consequences of the situation which can be seen over there in those regions. So the majority of the affected territories from Gaziantep, Mersin, and it's mostly the southeast of Turkey. Those are the affected areas, and communications are damaged there. A number of airports are out of operation for passenger connections. So my recommendation would be to abstain from visiting those regions. It's emergency and rescue teams who should be working there. If anybody wants to provide any help, so the humanitarian aid is needed. The new accounts are opened to support those affected by the disaster. If you want more information about the aftershocks, the underground aftershocks are going on for the second day in a row. There were more than 250 aftershocks in general. And in Ankara, which is located about 500-600 kilometers from the epicenter of the earthquake, it could be still felt. And some of the waves of the aftershocks were reaching the capital. So such movements of the earth core will still be going on. And again, everybody should abstain from visiting the areas close to the epicenter. Mr. Vasyl, we've heard the statements from our government that we are ready to send the rescue teams to Turkey. Can you give us a couple of comments on that? Well, the official comments will be given by the representatives of State Emergency Service and the top-level government. And the President's resolution was issued, and the State Emergency Service forwards about 100 of rescue personnel to Turkey, and I think that you will see the details shortly in the media. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions on the floor, please introduce yourself. Ukrinform, Ivan Kozyakin. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to get more details about the rescue operation, if I may. When can such operation be deployed, and will our rescuers use their own equipment, or will the equipment be provided by the Turkish side? Well, the rescue operation was deployed immediately right after the first shocks, and I hope that our rescuers will arrive today if we go by the optimistic scenario, but I cannot disclose any details for the time being because those teams have not left the territory of Ukraine so far. And with all due respect and my desire, within a couple of hours we will have the full detail about the rescue operation. We have more questions on the floor. Mr. Vasyl, good afternoon. Elena Rabini-Shafransky, Channel 5. Is there any aid provided by the President Erdogan and his government in terms of a temporary dwelling? Well, obviously there is such type of support provided by the Turkish government. A number of tents and tent camps is deployed near the areas affected by the earthquake. There are a lot of teams by of the police, armed forces, emergency service, Red Crescent, who work in the area, and the situation is such that a lot of relatives of those affected by the earthquake, they still remain in the area, and they hope to see their close ones to be rescued by the emergency teams working in there. Also, many hotels in Antalya are open to those who will wish to leave the areas of their residence due to the destruction of the or significant damage to their residential buildings. And I have to say that there are state programs, the government programs in place which allow those in need to receive the social dwelling in a prompt manner, so there is no issue with bulletin, but it's still difficult to say where will those affected by the earthquake move mostly. So because the people still want to find their closed ones, and they want to find out if they still need to leave the region. Also, the logistics is complicated due to the destruction of a number of roads due to the earthquake in that area. The weather conditions are not so comfortable as well, maybe not as it's not as cold in Ukraine, but still it poses hazard for the life and safety of those affected by the earthquake. Mr. Ambassador, another question is what countries are already involved in supporting those affected by the tragedy, and is Ukraine among such countries? Well, obviously Ukraine was among the first countries to provide the first support, first aid. Now, as we already mentioned, the rescue brigades are preparing to leave to provide aid and help in Turkey. More than 50 countries in total joined their efforts to support Turkey in the aftermath of this tragedy. So it's Pakistan, Bulgaria, and so on and so forth. Sweden also announced the first level of emergency today. Someone forwards airplanes, someone forwards trucks, medications, and so on and so forth. Well, I think that by the end of the day we will have the full picture of about those who arrived already to support Turkey in this tragedy, but the number of the rescue personnel will range from 50 to more than 100 from all over the world. Mr. Vasyl, thank you very much for joining our broadcast. Our next briefing will be at 1300, and we will talk about the situation in Kherson region, so bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and work together for the victory. Glory to Ukraine.